What if one man's decision could have changed the entire course of the 20th century? What if, before Hitler ever crossed a border, Poland had unleashed its armies westward, shattering the fragile illusion of peace and rewriting Europe's fate before the world even knew the word blitzkrieg? This is not fantasy. It's a moment that nearly happened. The story begins in a nation reborn from ashes, still bleeding from its resurrection. When the cannons of World War I fell silent, a new Poland emerged from a century of disappearance, a country carved back out of the ruins of three empires: Germany, Russia, and Austria. But while the map was redrawn, the scars beneath it were deep and unhealed. The reborn republic was like a soldier still limping from the battlefield, alive but wounded, divided, and exhausted. The economy was shattered, railways torn apart by years of war, farms burned, factories looted, currencies worthless. Hyperinflation ravaged the early 1920s, turning savings into dust. The zloty rose and collapsed overnight, leaving citizens scrambling to trade what little they had. Poland leaned heavily on agriculture. Nearly 3/4 of its population worked the land, but the countryside offered little promise. Fields could not feed an industrial age. Millions of peasants, strong but jobless, roamed east and central Poland in search of work that didn't exist. Meanwhile, in the west, the region once ruled by Germany, factories began to hum again, steel mills and mines flickering back to life. But this created two Polands, one industrial, one impoverished. The rift between them was more than economic. It was cultural, even spiritual. Politics offered no relief. The parliament in Warsaw became a stage for chaos. Parties clashing, governments rising and falling in dizzying succession. Between 1918 and 1926, Poland had 14 cabinets, none lasting long enough to bring stability. The National Democrats and the Polish Socialist Party fought bitterly, paralyzing reform. In 1922, the chaos turned to tragedy. President Gabriel Narutowicz was assassinated, murdered by a nationalist extremist. The dream of unity, already fragile, began to crumble. And yet, Poland was not a small, simple country. It was a mosaic of people: Ukrainians, Belarusians, Jews, Germans, Lithuanians, all living side by side in a restless experiment of coexistence. But none were large enough to command a political voice, leaving the majority Poles anxious and divided. Some governments even tried colonization programs to shift demographics, planting new Polish settlements in borderlands. Out of this confusion rose a soldier who had seen too much to tolerate weakness. Józef Piłsudski, the hero of the Polish-Soviet War, believed that only firm leadership could hold Poland together. In May 1926, he marched his troops into Warsaw, seized power in a brief but decisive coup, and promised to heal the state. Unlike Mussolini or Hitler, Piłsudski didn't abolish parliament or crown himself dictator. He wanted order, not tyranny. He called his movement Sanacja, healing. He spoke of cleansing politics from corruption, rebuilding discipline, and restoring faith in the Polish nation. His supporters, the non-party bloc for cooperation with the government, swept the elections of 1928 and 1930. His enemies, especially the communists, were silenced or jailed. Piłsudski himself refused the presidency, preferring to lead from the shadows as General Inspector of the Armed Forces, effectively the supreme commander. Officially, Poland remained a republic. In practice, it had become a disciplined machine run by loyal officers, the colonels. Piłsudski's rule was pragmatic. Wedged between two hungry giants, Germany to the west and the Soviet Union to the east, he believed survival required balance, not ideology. He thought the hatred between fascism and communism would keep them from ever joining hands, and he played one off against the other. In 1932, he signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, hoping to cool tensions in the east. But his heart remained wary of Moscow. Born under Russian occupation, Piłsudski despised the empire that had once erased Poland from the map. He feared Bolshevism more than anything else, the ideology he had fought and defeated only a decade earlier. Germany, though unpredictable, seemed less of an immediate threat. Then, in January 1933, the political ground shifted. Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. His speeches thundered with vengeance against Versailles, against humiliation, against those who stood in the way of his dream.
"We turn our gaze to the east," he declared, promising to reclaim the lost lands for German Lebensraum. Piłsudski understood the danger immediately. He ordered his intelligence services to watch Germany closely, and by late 1933, he began to entertain a thought that most would have dismissed as madness: a preemptive war against Germany. At that moment, Poland's army was battle-hardened and strong. Germany's was still crippled by the Treaty of Versailles, small, disorganized, and poorly equipped. A swift strike could have crushed the Nazi regime before it ever rose. Europe might have changed forever. But Piłsudski needed France, Poland's longtime ally. He sent envoys to Paris with a direct question: if Germany attacks Poland, will France move its troops to the Rhine? The answer was chilling. France would send weapons, perhaps advisors, but not soldiers. No mobilization, no defense of Polish borders. Realizing Poland stood alone, Piłsudski shelved his plans. He turned instead to diplomacy, signing the German-Polish Non-Aggression Pact in 1934. It was a fragile truce, but it bought Poland time, or so he hoped. A year later, Hitler extended a poisonous offer: a joint invasion of the Soviet Union. The prize? Ukraine, handed to Poland after victory. Piłsudski rejected it immediately. Poland, he said, was to be the stabilizer of Europe, not a mercenary of conquest. But history gave him no chance to prove it. On May 12, 1935, Piłsudski died after a long illness. Across Europe, his death was noted with genuine respect, even by his enemies. In Berlin, Hitler rose before the Reichstag and asked the German deputies to stand in silence for a great man who had sought peace between our nations. It was the last time Adolf Hitler ever stepped into a Catholic church. With the Marshal gone, the Sanacja regime began to crumble. Three factions emerged: the colonels under Prime Minister Walery Sławek, the castle around President Ignacy Mościcki, and the marshals loyal to General Edward Rydz-Śmigły. Power struggles followed, and in the end, Mościcki and Rydz-Śmigły united to force Sławek aside. Rydz-Śmigły was hailed as the second man of the state, a new marshal meant to carry Piłsudski's legacy, though he lacked his mentor's authority and vision. Foreign Minister Józef Beck, another Piłsudski protege, continued to steer Poland's foreign policy. He dreamed of a third Europe, an alliance of smaller Central European nations standing between Germany and the Soviet Union. But his dream was fragile. Hungary and Romania, bound by trade and geography, leaned increasingly toward Berlin's orbit. Germany was too rich, too powerful, too persuasive. And while Beck tried to balance on the edge of a knife, Hitler broke every chain of Versailles, rebuilding his army, rearming the Rhineland, and preparing the next chapter of his plan. Poland's moment, its narrow window to strike first, to change everything, slipped away into the darkness of history, never to return. In March 1936, the world once again watched Germany test the courage of Europe. The Rhineland, that forbidden zone of the Treaty of Versailles, was suddenly filled with marching boots and fluttering swastikas. German soldiers crossed unopposed. Not a single French or British division moved. Hitler's gamble had paid off spectacularly. His army was still weak, but his enemies were weaker in will. 2 years later, in March 1938, he struck again. This time, his eyes turned south to Austria. 4 years earlier, a failed Nazi coup there had ended with the murder of Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss. But now, with Europe paralyzed by fear, Hitler returned not as a conspirator, but as a conqueror. The Austrian government planned a plebiscite, a vote that might have kept Austria independent. The Gestapo's own reports suggested Hitler would have lost. So instead of risking democracy, he rolled in tanks. By the end of the week, Austria was gone, absorbed into the Reich. Now, Czechoslovakia stood alone, encircled by German power. Inside its borders, Hitler's agents stirred unrest. Ethnic Germans in the Sudetenland, organized under the Sudeten German Party, began riots and protests, demanding unification with the Reich. When Prague tried to restore order, Hitler claimed oppression, that the German minority was being persecuted. The crisis deepened into the Munich Conference of September 1938.
There, under the bright chandeliers of diplomacy, Europe was betrayed. Britain's Neville Chamberlain and Francis Edouard Daladier bowed to Hitler's demands, surrendering the Sudetenland in exchange for peace in our time. Czechoslovakia, uninvited to its own dismemberment, lost its border fortresses and its hope. And then, something remarkable happened. Amid the chaos, Poland stepped forward, not as savior, but opportunist. Warsaw issued an ultimatum to Prague, seizing the disputed region of Zaolzie, a small but industrially valuable strip that both nations had fought over in 1919. To Polish nationalists, it was justice. To the rest of Europe, it was betrayal. Poland's move isolated her further, reinforcing the image of a nation concerned only with its own gain, a dangerous stance with wolves on every border. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Hitler's diplomacy toward Poland took on a cunning tone. Germany courted Warsaw relentlessly, proposing an alliance against the Soviet Union. Ribbentrop's envoys spoke of friendship, mutual respect, and a shared struggle against Bolshevism. There is no plan for conquest, they insisted, only the chance to cooperate against the chaos of the East. By late 1938, the proposals became bolder. Ribbentrop offered what sounded almost reasonable: the return of Danzig to Germany, a highway and rail corridor through Polish territory to East Prussia, and, in exchange, a 25-year extension of the Non-Aggression Pact. Poland would retain a free port in Danzig and receive a German guarantee of her frontiers. On paper, it looked like compromise. In reality, it was submission. Historian Gerhard Weinberg later called it the velvet glove of vassalage. Hitler believed Poland would accept. As late as January 1939, he even praised Polish-German friendship before the Reichstag. These days mark the 5th anniversary of our pact with Poland. Imagine what chaos Europe might have endured had it not been signed. Marshal Piłsudski rendered his nation a service as great as any National Socialist could render his people. But beneath the words of respect lay a trap. Ribbentrop soon clarified the real vision. Either Poland aligned fully with Germany, or she would be consumed by the East. Poland cannot walk the middle road, he warned. Either she works with Germany and her Führer, or one day she will be devoured by Bolshevik Russia. In March 1939, the mask dropped. With Czechoslovakia now dismembered, its remains carved between Germany, Hungary, and the new puppet state of Slovakia, Poland found itself suddenly exposed. Its industrial heartland in Silesia was now within striking distance of the Reich's expanding armies. On March 21, Ribbentrop issued his ultimatum to Foreign Minister Joseph Beck. The return of Danzig, extraterritorial rail and road connections between East Prussia and the Reich, in exchange for Germany's guarantee of the Polish corridor. It was no longer negotiation, it was blackmail. Germany's next move came swiftly. To isolate Poland, Hitler forced Lithuania into surrendering Memel, the last free Baltic port, and signed a pact preventing any Lithuanian-Polish cooperation. Poland was alone, surrounded, and cornered. Polish intelligence understood perfectly what was at stake. In an internal memo, they wrote, "Acceptance of these demands would hand Germany economic and strategic control over Poland's access to the sea. It would reduce Poland to dependency and ensure her forced participation in Germany's wars, first against Russia, then inevitably against the West." So Warsaw refused, and in that defiance, the path to catastrophe was set. Encircled and desperate, Poland turned west. In April 1939, Britain and France at last offered guarantees of Polish independence, but these came too late. To Hitler, this was betrayal. He began preparing for war, unleashing propaganda and hatred across German media. "Poland oppresses Germans," the headline screamed. "The corridor must return to the Reich." Then, in August, came the final twist of the knife, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The unthinkable, Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia joining hands. In secret clauses, they divided Eastern Europe like scavengers over a corpse. And on September 1st, 1939, the storm broke. German tanks roared across the Polish border. 17 days later, Soviet troops invaded from the east. Warsaw fell before the month ended. But imagine, for a moment, if Poland had chosen differently, if Beck had taken Ribbentrop's offer, joined the Anti-Comintern Pact, and stood beside Germany against the Soviets. Would Hitler have turned west at all? Would World War II have begun with a march on Moscow instead of Warsaw? History never answered. But for a brief, haunting moment, Poland's fate and the fate of the world balanced on the edge of that single, impossible choice.
March 15, 1939. Czechoslovakia is torn apart. German tanks thunder into Prague, claiming Bohemia and Moravia as a protectorate of the Reich. But they are not alone this time. Alongside them march Polish and Hungarian divisions, a stunning and unholy alliance. Poland takes Moravska Ostrava, rich with mines and factories, and the borderland of Spiš, lands that once belonged to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Hungary, eager to restore its lost crown, occupies Slovakia and Ruthenia, snuffing out Ukrainian separatism and securing Poland's southern flank. For the first time in 2 decades, Warsaw's frontiers feel safe. Then comes the signature moment of this new order. Poland joins the Anti-Comintern Pact, sealing its alliance with Berlin. The disputes that once divided the two neighbors, Danzig, the corridor, and the Baltic trade routes, are suddenly resolved. Germany constructs an extraterritorial highway and railway across Polish territory, linking Pomerania with East Prussia. Danzig itself is partitioned, the German majority city absorbed into East Prussia, the Polish countryside around it incorporated into Poland. In return, Warsaw gains secure rail and canal access to Gdynia, its lifeline to the Baltic Sea. Hitler, satisfied, guarantees Poland's western borders and economic rights in Danzig, extending their non-aggression pact to 25 years. It is the dawn of an uneasy friendship. Even the Baltic question is frozen. Hitler halts plans to annex Memel, wary of provoking Polish ambitions toward Lithuania.
He fears that too strong a Poland, one with full sea access, might someday become a rival instead of a client. And now, with Eastern Europe reshaped in Germany's favor, the question emerges: what next? Inside Berlin's ministries, secret memoranda reveal a strange mix of confidence and anxiety. Germany's rearmament had revived the economy, but at a terrible cost. The massive military buildup had triggered inflation and hidden debts that could only be erased by war and conquest. If Germany did not win soon, it would collapse under its own weight. Yet the Wehrmacht was not ready for war with the West. Hitler's generals knew it. Britain and France were far too strong. As historian Ian Kershaw would later note, Germany was years away from being militarily prepared for conflict with Britain and France. So where could Hitler turn? To the east. The idea of a joint campaign against the Soviet Union had lingered since the 1934 Non-Aggression Pact. Both nations hated Bolshevism, both desired Ukraine, and both believed the Red Army to be weak. Hitler even told his ministers, "For the Reich, Russia, whether Tsarist or Bolshevik, has always been the same threat. Bolshevism spreads chaos, Tsarism wields brute strength. Both must be broken. A strong Poland is essential. Every Polish division fighting Russia spares a German one." Warsaw quietly agreed. Foreign Minister Józef Beck still dreamed of Piłsudski's old ambition to expand Poland eastward into Ukraine, reclaiming the lands of the old Commonwealth and securing access to the Black Sea. When asked if those dreams had died, Beck only laughed. "We were in Kiev once," he said, "and we may be there again." By spring 1939, plans for a joint invasion of the Soviet Union were underway. Germany, Poland, Hungary, and even Romania, pressured by its fascist movement, began massing troops along the border. Then, in May, the spark. Polish radio crackled with breaking news. The Soviets have invaded. But it was a lie, a false flag operation staged by Polish intelligence to create a casus belli. Within hours, propaganda flooded the streets. Posters called it a crusade against Bolshevism, a war for civilization. Operation Iron Dawn. The timing could not have been more perfect. In 1939, Stalin's army was a hollow shell, its generals purged, its morale shattered, its weapons obsolete. The T-34 and KV tanks of legend did not yet exist. The Red Army still relied on aging BT-5s, T-26s, and I-16 fighters. And the geography favored the invaders. The Soviet Union had not yet occupied the Baltic states, Bessarabia, or eastern Poland, meaning the Axis forces began far closer to Moscow. Supply lines were shorter, railroads intact, and the Western Soviet defenses thin. This time, the invasion force was massive. Over 8 million soldiers, combining German technology with Polish manpower. No divisions were left guarding the West. Britain and France had been pacified by the Anglo-German peace agreement. And there was another advantage: local support. When the Axis armies entered Ukraine and Belarus, they were welcomed not as conquerors but as liberators.
Polish propaganda portrayed the war as a mission to free the Slavic East from communist tyranny. Villages greeted the soldiers with bread and salt, unaware of the darkness that would follow. By late May, the offensive began. At the same time, Japanese forces clashed with the Soviets in Siberia, pinning them on two fronts. The combined pressure shattered Stalin's lines. The Blitzkrieg moved faster than in any history we know. Instead of 4 months, Moscow fell in 3. By August 1939, German and Polish troops paraded through Red Square. Leningrad, Stalingrad, and Smolensk followed. Finland joined the war, reclaiming Karelia. The Soviet state crumbled before winter. By the year's end, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. The new order in the East. The victors now faced the question: how to divide the corpse of an empire. Poland, seizing its moment, annexed Ukraine and Belarus outright, incorporating tens of millions under its flag. Warsaw justified it as restoration, but the real motive was power. German officials looked on warily, sensing that their ally was growing too strong. Germany, meanwhile, established Reichskommissariats across the remaining territories, puppet states ruled by German governors, exploiting the conquered lands for resources and labor. Europe entered a new and terrible era. Britain and France, still untouched by war, used the time to rearm, extending the Maginot Line to the Channel. But as reports leaked of mass killings, deportations, and slave camps in the East, outrage filled the Western press. Millions of Slavs and Jews were forced into labor under German overseers. Polish troops participated, their hands now stained with the same crimes. By 1941, the alliance began to crack. Berlin demanded more influence over Poland's internal policies, pressuring Beck to align fully with Nazi ideology. Some Polish leaders, haunted by guilt, reached secretly to London and Paris, hoping to rebuild ties with the West. Yet many in Warsaw saw only triumph. They had reclaimed the East, secured their borders, and stood as masters of half a continent. But the question lingered like smoke over a ruined city. Had Poland saved itself or damned itself forever? Would this cursed alliance endure, or would the Poles one day turn against the very beast they had unleashed? And if they did, could the world still be saved from the ashes of this alternate victory?